We're focusing tonight on understanding ADHD, empowering awareness, support, and strategies. However, our panelists have a diverse perspective up here. We're going to talk also about suicide prevention, adolescence, military backgrounds, and how mental health plays in that area, legislative advocacy, and behavioral analysis. So tonight, we bring together leaders and professionals to talk about mental health from different angles. Again, suicide prevention, military, child and adolescent counseling, behavior analysis, and legislative advocacy. Together, these voices that we have here tonight will help us with a deeper understanding and work towards solutions. So before we get started, I want to acknowledge again our diverse population that we're working with in the city of Fayetteville and how we are aiming to contribute as a mental health advisory board. So tonight we have Ms. Ricks, who is our chair of our mental health advisory board. She will share briefly about her background and how she will contribute to tonight's webinar.
Hi, Tracy Ricks. I have a master's in counseling psychology. Hi, I'm Tracy Ricks, and I have a master's in counseling psychology, and I'm a licensed Christian therapist. I also work with Greater Georgia Behavioral Health Center, and I have over 10 plus years of experience with counseling, and I specialize also in group counseling. And I'm very excited about what I can bring to the panel tonight.
My name is Dr. Kenneth Lou Kuhn. I go by Lou. For some folks that have known me a long time, it's Ken, but I like Lou better. But I serve as the president of Stop Suicide USA, and we've been here in the local community since 2012. I have written a couple of books on suicide intervention, and we've trained about 31,000 people all over the country. But as I have shared with many people in this room, my heartbeat is right here in my community, and this is our focus tonight, and hopefully we can raise the bar on getting more people trained in suicide intervention locally. So that's what I do.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Martin. I am a certified forensic mental health evaluator, also licensed professional counselor, and a board certified behavior analyst. With that being said, I have a heart and desire to help those with mental health, substance abuse, intellectual disabilities, as well as autism.
Okay, thank you all so much. So how tonight's flow will actually take place, we will go over a series of different types of themes, symptomologies, and things of that nature where you all are our experts, and you're going to be presented with several questions, and we will then later ask the audience to kind of come in if they have any questions. But our first question will be an open roundtable where all of you all will be able to contribute to this actual question. So October highlights both depression and mental health screening, as well as ADHD awareness. From your professional perspective, and I'll start with you, Ms. Rakes, from your professional perspective, why are awareness and early screening so critical in addressing mental health?
It's important to have early screening because of the fact that often we wait too late. When I say too late, it's hard to kind of catch up when we're behind. And by me being a person of great faith, I know in our faith-based community, sometimes we can say, I'm just going to pray it away, or we just wait until the symptoms just get so overwhelming that it's almost hard for anyone to get the help that they need before they go into a deep depression or start spiraling where they feel like they can't come out of it. So I am very passionate about seeking help and seeking it early. And once again, I always share with my clients that seeking help is not a sign of weakness, but it's actually a sign of strength.
Awesome. Can you speak a little bit more towards kids, and since you specialize in youth and things of that nature, and how kids struggle with, expressing their emotions? How can we bring that to the city of Fayetteville, and how can we tap into our youth as well?
A lot of times kids have a hard time expressing, especially to parents and people in authority, because they don't want to feel like they're being a burden. I find a lot of times with the youth, they're saying that I don't want my mom to feel like it's her fault or my dad's fault. And I think it's very important that we make them aware that we all have emotions, we have feelings, and sometimes they're not always good. And so I always share with parents, and I share this with them so that they can let their children know that it's okay not to be okay. It's just not okay for me to stay that way forever. And I also encourage a lot of group counseling because of the fact that when kids come together, well, anyone at any age, you can have people in a community that will support you, that's on your same journey of healing, where there's no judgment, but just encouragement and empowerment to seek the help that we often need, especially with our youth.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dr. Ken, same question to you. From your professional perspective, why are awareness and early screening so critical? Looking at it again from the collaboration of suicide prevention and depression being an onset.
It will save lives. That's my perspective. If we have awareness and we raise the level of awareness and raise the bar on more people talking about this subject, it'll raise awareness. I think tonight is a perfect segue. So parents that are out there listening, go home tonight or be home tonight and say, hey, I was listening to an interesting conversation tonight, and have that conversation with your kids. One of the things that I often say to parents, teach your kids what loyalty means, because loyalty doesn't mean I keep secrets. A lot of kids want to they'll tell their friends what they're going through, but they won't tell their parents. And they think that they're being loyal. And loyalty doesn't mean I keep secrets. Loyalty means I keep safe. And so we had, for example, I teach in every class I teach, I tell parents, teach your kids, if you see something, say something. Even if your friend said, don't say anything to anybody, if it is something that is life and death, then they need to learn that they have to tell their parents. They don't want to carry the weight of that by themselves. They don't need to feel like they're the only friend that can help. Parents need to get involved in helping with the discussion. So teach your kids tonight. This is a perfect opportunity. I was watching a program today on the internet with Fayetteville Mental Health Program, and I just want to talk to you a minute. And you could start off by saying, do you have any friends that have ever had thoughts of suicide? They're going to say, yeah, Mom, yeah, Dad, I have. Okay, let's talk about what loyalty means. I know you want to be loyal to them, but you want to keep them safe. So if you see something, say something, and that will take us a long step in the right direction on helping to build a stronger, more resilient community.
So would you agree that depression is often invisible until the crisis is actually present?
Oh, absolutely. You know, there's the stats out there tell us that 1 out of 5 children, especially, and adults, but particularly 1 out of 5 children will never show any signs that they're suicidal, for example. And a lot of folks say, well, then those are the ones that are going to lose their lives. And that's not true, because if we've raised the level of awareness, then we know that we don't need signs to know that we need to intervene. We're aware of the circumstances. And from a faith community standpoint, that's what the church is all about.
Okay.
You know, we should be the faith community that knows that people are hurting, even when there's no sign that they're apparently hurting. We know their circumstances. It's like the ingredients in a pound cake. You know, you can make a mess with one ingredient, and circumstances are the ingredients in the pound cake. If the ingredients are on the table of their life, and a teenager is suffering, I just had a call just 5 minutes before this interview tonight with a teenager, a mother who has a teenager that's struggling. And if we know that a teenager has just broken up with their boyfriend or girlfriend, or we know that they're not going to get into the school that all their friends are going into, or maybe they've got to move out of the community because mom and dad are getting a divorce and they can't stay in our Ritzy County anymore. And now they got to move to South Georgia to live with grandma and grandpa. Those are ingredients. Those are circumstances. So any change in circumstances, we should be having a conversation. It doesn't have to go straight to the suicide question, but how are you doing with the changes in your life? And that's the starting point.
Right. So recognizing those early warning signs
That's right.
before the escalation. Absolutely. So going over to our LPC and our behavior analyst, same question to you from your professional perspective. Why are awareness and early screening?
Yeah,
So-
sure. To piggyback off of Dr. Kuhn and Ms. Ricks regarding the community, it definitely involves a collaborative effort with us all. It helps with structure. It helps with minimizing the symptoms, the barriers, as well as the intervention. So overall, the ultimate goal is not necessarily be in therapy for the rest of your life, but if you intervene early, you're able to add that structure at the very onset.
So would you agree that screening provides that baseline for intervention?
Yes, most definitely, screening provides that baseline.
Okay, can you give us some insight on some of the screening that you may do in your practice? You have a practice right here in the heart of Fayetteville.
Yes. So some screening entails collaborative efforts, as I mentioned. So when it comes to interviewing parents, interviewing teachers, any individuals that have a relationship with the person at hand that's needing services. So asking about their strengths, their weaknesses, some barriers, some challenges, how are you already intervening with the behavior? Because sometimes you can reinforce a behavior and not know that you're actually reinforcing it. So sometimes you yourself need the proper training and knowledge and skill set so that you can also modify your behaviors, modify the behaviors at home.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to our second question that's going to be directly to all of you. How does stigma affect people seeking screening for depression? And you speak to your symptom or symptomology that you are used to with depression, PTSD, or ADHD? And what roles can professionals, policymakers, and communities play in breaking that stigma? And I'll start with you, Dr. Kuhn.
So stigma is sort of, I don't know if anybody in the room or online remembers Sergeant Schultz from Hogan's Hero, but what was his mantra? It was, I know nothing, I hear nothing, I see nothing. And that's the typical response when we live in a stigma society that doesn't want to look at anything. We sweep things under the rug. We act like everything's okay. Or we go back to what you were suggesting, if you just have more faith or if you just prayed harder, and then that stigmatizes people even further because maybe they do have faith and you just marginalized it because you didn't act like they had faith in the first place. And we all struggle with things. And so by having an open dialogue, we naturally reduce the stigma. Hey, you're having thoughts of suicide. That's my area of focus. Let's talk about your thoughts of suicide. We don't sweep it under the rug. But one of the problems is that people think that when we talk about it, it's going to increase the risk. No, talking about it actually decreases the risk because now someone else knows and I'm not carrying it in my head all by myself. Because when we keep stuff in our own mind, it wreaks havoc on our thoughts, and we think we're the only person going through this. Nobody else knows has the problems I have. But when we're willing to bring it out and put it on the table, we realize other people have issues as well. And the reality is 1 out of 10 people are having thoughts of suicide at any given time. And so if we understand that, then we reduce the stigma. And one of the ways that I do that when I'm asking the suicide question, I'll often preface it by saying, sometimes when people are going through a struggle, a crisis event like you're going through, they do have thoughts of suicide. And just have a little pregnant pause there for just a second to let it sink in. And then the next question you ask is not going to surprise them. Sometimes when people are going through things like you're going through, they have thoughts of suicide. I'm just wondering, are you having thoughts of suicide? And you don't ask it in a frantic way. You just ask it like a caring friend, and they will mirror your response. And they will say, yeah, I have had those thoughts. If we've taken the time to build rapport with people, that's another way we can reduce stigma. And then we can ask the difficult questions because we've taken time to build that relationship.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We're definitely working very diligently with the Mental Health Advisory Board, trying to ensure that stigma does not silence people's voices, especially in crises. Moving on to our behavior analyst, same question to you.
Okay. For me, when it comes to stigma, I definitely to get a collaborative or understanding of where the person is coming from. A lot of times derived from mistrust, being misunderstood, not having feeling like they have a voice. So when it comes to professionals and policymakers in the community at large, how we can help to reduce that stigma is to also educate ourselves so that we are socially aware when it comes to the vast communities that we offer services to. So whether it's obtaining training your own self every quarter, annually, what have you, but we should become competent as well as professionals in the industry to be able to service those, as well as I would say another community initiative would be to partner with other organizations, like-minded organizations that help bring that awareness to reduce that stigma.
Okay. Can you speak a little bit about your working with the youth with schools as well, and how stigma can lead to misleading of behavior as well in the school system?
I would say working with the school system can be very difficult when it comes to if professionals in particular and families are unaware of the services that what we call interventions. So sometimes if new practices are presented, an individual may have a misunderstanding and may be reluctant to embrace it. So it's up to us to help educate, ask those, answer those hard questions, and just being encouraging throughout the process. So when it comes to the schools, once again, it's the more so to help share their awareness, bring awareness, and bring competency to those that servicing the children within the school.
Okay, thank you so much. Ms. Ricks, same question to you.
Well, I agree. Of course, I'm going to stay in agreement, especially concerning our faith-based communities. That's what I have a passion for, because I know growing up in church, we always thought that, of course, you had to have more faith. If you just pray, it's going to be okay. But I found that for me, Jesus in therapy has been a great combination. And so just being aware and also making people comfortable coming to you, you know, having that uncomfortable conversation, like, oh, wow, what you thought about that? You know, like it's something wrong with it. And I found that even with group therapy, which I absolutely love, that I always share with my clients, you're in a safe space, no judgment, but just encouragement, empowerment, and whatever else you need to heal. So becoming aware early, you know, and also just knowing that it's okay, and I'm going to say this a lot, not to be okay. It's just not okay for you to stay that way. You don't have to suppress your emotions. A lot of times we've been taught it's wrong to cry, but God bottles our tears, you know? So it's okay. You're going to have those days, what my clients call the suck days, you know? But you don't want it to get to the point to where as you can't come up from that suck day. So being in an environment where you're comfortable with sharing your feelings, your emotions, whether it be at church, whether it be at school, wherever you are, even with your loved ones. You know, I agree that parents should be more aware. Aunties and uncles be aware that if you have a niece, a nephew, or somebody who's usually an extrovert, now they're an introvert, that could be a sign that something is going on. Or if this person has always been vocal and all of a sudden they stop talking and wanting to come around. Just paying attention to the warning signs. So I totally agree with what you said, that, you know, becoming aware and just making ourselves more knowledgeable about mental health. Because when I was growing up, you know, of course, I'm a little bit older, we didn't have the privilege of therapy and we didn't have the opportunity to share how we felt. You know, a lot of times, even being young, they would just say, go play, you're going to be okay. I remember being told that I was extra sensitive. You know, so just knowing that we're in 2025 and it's okay to receive help, and it's okay not to be okay. Once again, we just don't want you to stay that way.
Dr. Kuhn, just tapping into your military understanding and just working with just a vast population, how do we, you know, aid our military population that's here in Fayetteville in breaking that stigma and coming forward to actually assist or ask for assistance?
Yeah, so as a veteran, I can speak to that because I work with soldiers all the time when I was in the military, and I deal with a lot of veterans today. And the veteran community does have they tend to keep their emotions to themselves because I was a veteran. I'm not going to talk about it. Police officers, fire departments, the same way. They wear the body armor. But underneath that body armor, there's a human heart that's hurting. And we have to recognize that. And to your point, just letting them know it's okay to not be okay. We don't have to act upon any thoughts we have. I mean, I don't think anybody in the room's ever acted on every thought you have because we'd all be in trouble.
Thank God.
We'd all be in jail somewhere. So but we have these thoughts. So let's talk about these thoughts. And that's how we eradicate that. I had a spouse just last week. I was on the road to South Carolina, and a spouse of a veteran called me, and he's not willing to talk to me right now. But my thought is about that. You didn't go to the desert by yourself. Why do you think you can fight this battle by yourself? And military, the fire department's the same way. You don't send one firefighter out to a call, you send a team. And police, when there's a struggle, they don't just try to handle it by themselves.
True.
They have backup. And so veterans need to understand you fought together in the desert. We need to fight together with this war that's in your head. And that's the way we can work together. We are stronger together.
Better together. That's good.
Absolutely. Would you like to chime in for us, Ms. Morgan?
Sure. To add to that, how we in Fayetteville could help aid the veterans, going back to the screening, sometimes an individual, whether it's a veteran or just a general civilian, they may not know what they're actually dealing with. So having that appropriate screening can help them identify what they're currently dealing with so that they now have options and resources available to help them better manage their life and so that they can become more resilient and have a more balanced lifestyle. So having those resources available within the city of Fayetteville, so whether it's the housing, the utilities, food, shelter, et cetera, jobs, all these resources could help an individual, especially a veteran, to thrive.
Okay, can you talk more about the mental health hub as well that we have implemented on the board?
Yeah, so we have a mental health hub that we have on the website that we offer the services. We also have it in our newsletters. So if you would like to sign up to the newsletter, for the Fayetteville newsletter, you'll be able to have that resource as well.
So our mental health hub have a host of information on there too, a lot of different type of intervention approaches that you all could use, but we have a screening on there as well. And I'm sure that you use this in your practice, the PHQ-9 and the
Yeah.
GAD-7. Are those some of the baselines that you use when you're working with the military population, depression?
Yes.
You speak more to those screenings as well?
So, like I mentioned, when it comes to screening, sometimes to be not as intrusive when it comes to what a person may present with, you may want to use a brief screening. So those PHQ-9, which is basically a shorter version of a depression scale or anxiety an individual may be going through, so that way you can kind of address it on the onset and be able, through therapy and with time, allow that individual to open up more and more, and then you'll learn more about their traumas or situations that they could be dealing with.
Awesome. I always tell my clients as well that PHQ-9, and would you agree, that PHQ-9, that depression scale is you mainly kind of looking behind you where you're ruminating. You haven't overcome that past trauma, those past challenges. Whereas that GAD-7, the anxiety scale, is something that you're feeling present or looking to the future, the unknown, and that's what's kind of building the anxiety. Is that how you implement it as well in your practice?
Yes, most definitely, because there's a difference between past and current, and we have to understand that even though we currently today maybe present this way, but it's trickled by something that you might have experienced in the past. So being able to not only address the current, but you want to address the past too. And so having the appropriate provider or practitioner knowledgeable enough to know that it's a holistic approach when it comes to intervention, when it comes to therapy, so that way that you get that full service when it comes to therapeutic interventions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to our next topic, and we're now going to focus in that collaboration space of depression and suicide awareness. All right, so our first question will be to our suicide prevention specialist, Dr. Kuhn. How does untreated depression intersect with suicide risk? And what are some key warning signs families as well as coworkers should look for? And you kind of spoke on this already, but just kind of going into more depth to provide our audience with those, standout warning signs that they need to know if they see them firsthand.
So if a person is having thoughts of suicide, they may not have ever been diagnosed with depression, but it's very obvious that depression is there. It's going to be present. And so that's the first thing we need to be aware of. Well, they've never been diagnosed, so they're not, but that's the tip of the iceberg. And so from a standpoint of, kind of restate the question for me. I'm sorry. It's like a day.
How does untreated depression intersect with suicide risk?
Yeah.
And what are those key warning signs that families, schools, coworkers should look for?
All right. So the signs that we look for may not be there. That's part of the problem. Someone can be depressed and not show any signs of depression. And so again, that's why I always default to the circumstances. What's going on that might have caused them to be depressed and change something in their mental process that they're not showing any signs at all? Because again, think about teenagers specifically. 1 out of 5 teenagers will not show any signs of suicidal ideation. You won't know they're depressed just because they're doing the same thing they've always done. But if they're having some type of situation in their life, we need to engage with them. Now, if they're showing signs like they're withdrawing from their friends, maybe their grades are going down, they're acting out, they're cursing at their parents and they've never done that before. It might be standard procedure for families to do that to each other. But if it's something out of the ordinary and that's not the way that's not their typical MO, so to speak, then something's going on and we need to be aware of that. And so if you're aware, for example, I had a full bird colonel when I was at Fort Dix, New Jersey, that the thing that tipped him over the edge was the fact that his wife had presented him with divorce papers during lunch. Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. He was already depressed. He was already going to anger management. He was already involved in post-traumatic stress classes and things of that nature. He was already going to counseling with his wife to try to save his marriage. But then knowing it wasn't just the divorce papers that put him over the edge. It was everything else that had put him into the post-traumatic stress class in the first place. He'd had soldiers that had killed themselves. He had been shot at. He had killed people in the desert. He had lost soldiers here on the homeland in a helicopter accident. So, and he felt responsible for that. And so if we can put all those together and we know what's going on in a person's life, 99% of the time, depression is going to be there anyway.
Right.
And so we've just got to be community that is willing to ask people, how are you doing? How are you doing? Because you've been through all of these things. And I name what it is. And you don't say, I understand, because that's walking in shoes you've never walked in. But I will often say, I can see that the divorce papers is causing you a lot of pain. I can see that the fact that you didn't get into the school all your friends are going to, that's causing a lot of pain. That acknowledges that you see what they're going through, and they're going to be more willing at that point, because we talked about stigma. You just reduced the stigma a lot because you said, I see it. I see it. They're going to be willing to talk about it if we acknowledge that we see it.
Absolutely. Ms. Martin, speaking from an academic standpoint, same question as far as some of those warning signs that educators should kind of seek when they're working with a large class, right? Some of those things can actually be missed. So what should we educate our educators on as well?
What I can say as far as what our educators back to becoming competent and being aware of the population that you service, especially when it comes to children, having those check-ins are important, no matter if it's sunny outside or rainy outside, no matter what type of day it is. Just having those check-ins, because you just never know what their night before presented with or what their circumstances are currently. So I would say the most important thing would be to have check-ins, to also, when you do notice a behavior change, not something fleeting that happened this week and it doesn't happen again in another 6 months, but it's consistently for 2 weeks at a time, I would say. Instead of not saying anything, it's okay to say something, especially checking in with the parents. Hey, I just want to check in how is everything going at home? How was y'all weekend? It's just having that open conversation and that dialogue, you may get information you didn't even know existed. You may find out the family's been driving around in the car all night because they're homeless. So it's different variables that can happen. It's not for us to kind of see and just look or judge or place judgment on what we see, because every behavior has a motive. And for every behavior, there's a reason why people behave how they behave.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Ritz. Now chiming in on here.
I was just thinking as she was talking, as both of you guys were talking about the warning signs, I was thinking from a parent's standpoint that even though I am a therapist, I'm also a parent. And I know for me that every day I check in with my children, even my grown children. Like we talk and I'm like, how was your day? And they'll share with me certain things. And I know based upon, as you were stating about the change of season in their life. Like my oldest daughter, she just graduated from college and she's going through that transition of career, trying to find a job. So I'm really more intentional even with her, how are you coming along with this? And with social media, you see all of your friends and they seem like they're so happy and everybody has the ideal dream job, and so she and I just recently had a in-depth counseling session concerning make sure she's, aware of the amount of time she's spending on social media so that she won't be bogged down and burdened down with comparison. And I have a daughter who's also a junior in college, and we talk daily usually. She's going to check in. She's going to make sure, see how's it going with your semester, your school, your exam. She just had a very almost overwhelming weekend because she had a lot of projects to turn in and everything. And I checked in to make sure she was eating. Are you sleeping? How are you feeling emotionally? And I do it in a way that they can be comfortable saying that, Mom, I'm not doing real good, because I'm transparent with them. So I let them know today's just not one of those days, So I realize that as a parent, if we're vulnerable with our children also, then they'll be more comfortable with coming to us with their vulnerability. So as a parent, that's, one of the things I have implemented in our relationship to check in with them daily. So, and also I have a son who's on sabbatical for college. He realized there was a lot going on. He did very well, but he didn't like his environment. So I was aware of that and I didn't try to push him, stay in school when he was feeling overwhelmed. So I think that's important too, because my beliefs were you start, you stay. No matter what's going on, I came out of an environment, you stay regardless. And I remember being a freshman in college and I had a hard time transitioning. I probably should have took a sabbatical, but I didn't know it was an option. So I love my parents, but they wasn't aware. But I just think being a parent, even as our children are aging, if you have grown kids that might be married, reach out to them, check in with them. You just got married. How's it coming along, honey? So I think it's just important for all of us to be aware that there are warning signs. And as you stated, not just signs, but just change of environment, change of a situation, seasons in our lives that change that could cause us to, have those unpleasant feelings and thoughts that comes our way.
Ms. Rich, you spoke about two great things that I want to kind of tap back into for our parents. One would be social comparison. And also from what I'm hearing, the importance of updating our parenting styles, right? Because like you stated, how you were raised and your beliefs, it may not transition into today's raising of our children. So speak to the need of parents, listening to our children, but possibly updating and kind of throwing out some of those old ways of parenting and let's say making space for our children today so that we can listen to them and their needs, because it's a very different world today, right? So this
Yes,
more.
I am very passionate about that. I do a lot of group counseling, and in a lot of my groups, I have different age groups. And at first I was like, okay, we got 20-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 30-year-olds, and 63 was one of the oldest one in our groups. But when I realized that the younger generation brought a lot of enlightenment to us, to some of us that were older. Because a lot of the kids, I call them kids, but they're 18, 19, 20. They're kids to me. And they would come into groups sharing with me how they can't talk to their parents, or maybe that, my mom is in denial about my need for help. They'll tell me a lot. I wish you were my mom. I had one of my clients recently, and I can't call names, but she had a great accomplishment in her life. She's going through therapy, and we were in group. And so she had an announcement that she got into a school of her choice. And I just jumped up and I just hugged her, and I was like, I'm so, you're working on your mental health. And I said, go ahead, I'll let you go call your parents. So she went outside and came in tears. I was like, what's wrong? Because I'm thinking I'm giving you something, an encouraging word. Go call your parents. And she was like, I wish you were my mother. And I was like, I'll be your mom's mom if I can. But she didn't get the reaction that she wanted, And I was like, well, you're doing good because you're working on your mental health. And then you reach this goal. So it's making me even more aware as a parent that we have to learn how to transition with our children. What your child might have needed at 8 might be different at 18. Absolutely. What they need at 25 or 30. And I think parenting never stops. Of course, we can't. We don't want to micromanage our kids, want them to grow up. But as a parent, I would always want to be there for my child, whether they were 55, 60, or 75. I know me personally at my age, I like to check in with my mom. And when she's saying, hey, everything's going to be okay, it makes me feel a little bit better about my day. So I'm just learning through the groups is that we have to learn how to transition with our children. And so a lot of them, even 18, 20, and 30, some of their issues is stemming from not being able to talk with their parents and not having that extra parental support.
Okay, thank you. Also, kind of correlating social comparison with some of our teens and younger adults, and that spike that we have seen with suicide ideation and depression. Can you speak a little bit more to that? And then I'll come to you as well, Dr. Kuhn.
It's very bad. I usually don't use the word bad a lot now with that social comparison, that social media fame. Everybody want to be a TikTok star, or everybody wants to have a lot of followers, and everybody wants to be important now. And so we really need to encourage our children, whether they be 8, 18, 25, to be aware of the amount of time they spend on there. And most of the things that we think we see is not what we really see, because everybody's showing their best pictures and, all their good news. Nobody's sharing about their depression or them being overwhelmed. And parents are not talking about, the children that they're having problems with. They're showing the kids is doing good, right? So I just believe that we should be more aware of the way social media can really have a great impact on overall mental health with grown people, children, whoever it is, parents. Some parents, because they see other people's children who are succeeding. Now they're putting pressure on their child, and I just know that social media, I'm not saying it's all bad, but I've seen more damage that it's doing to especially our youth, than good. And I told my daughter just recently, one of my daughters, I was telling her, I think you should come off for a while. It was just in my spirit, sometimes your unction that like you said, paying attention to the signs and the environment. She's a very outgoing young lady, but I just picked up that I think she needs to take a break. And she said, I will, Mom, I'll log out. And my youngest daughter, she doesn't spend time on there. My son, they don't really care for it. But I noticed my oldest daughter, she spends more time on there. And I'm just sharing with her, we just had this conversation. I think it's time for you to take a break. And she saw me taking breaks, I'm not on there all the time. That's another thing, leading by example. If you're a social, media junkie and you're posting pictures at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you're always talking about your friends and what they're doing, guess what? Our kids are going to catch that. I tell my clients all the time, some things are taught and some things are caught. So I want them to catch the good things about my life, and how to navigate it in a healthy way.
Absolutely. Dr. Kuhn, also with social comparison and how that is actually spiking with our youth and depression and suicide ideation.
I would speak to at this point is, and I don't think I see any teenagers in the room. But for us as older adults to have a greater appreciation for what young people are going through today, because I'm pretty sure a lot of us in this room have the idea that we were more resilient than teenagers are today. I hear that quite a lot. You know, when I was a kid, I didn't wear a helmet to skateboard, you know, and nowadays we do that. And so older adults have this tendency to push this idea that we were more resilient than teenagers are today. And I would come back with a different view. I think that teenagers are stronger today because they're going through so much more. And this is one of them right here. When I was in school, in high school, you could go home and get away from the bully. You can't do that today. The bully is there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When I was a kid, yeah, you know, maybe it was pot, but nowadays it's meth and all kinds of other things that they're struggling with. And then the fact that we are comparing ourselves against something that is not even real. You know, when you can put a fake background in the background, it looks like you were in Hawaii and you were never there, or you're surrounded by wealth and it's not there. I mean, that's an illusion. And I use an example all the time in my class. Does anybody really believe that David Copperfield made the Eiffel Tower disappear? No, he didn't. It's an illusion. And suicide is the David Copperfield of our mind. It's a trick on the mind. And we are being tricked today by social media. There's a reason that the executives and the big platforms, and I won't mention names, but you know the big platforms, there's a reason the executives didn't want their teenagers having an account, because they know they've created a monster. And we just had a situation in California last month that came out in the news where a young man was chatting with AI and he was suicidal. And he said, should I tell my mother that I'm having thoughts of suicide? And the response was, let's keep it to ourselves right now. This is a robot telling a young teenager to keep it to himself. And he continued to spiral to the point of making a plan. And the AI responded, the best plan would be to hang yourself. And that's exactly what he did. So now there's a major lawsuit in California, and I hope they win, because it needs to set a precedent that we've created a monster with social platforms and with AI in particular. It's a very, very dangerous thing when people are relying on that. I had a young man that was getting kicked out of parties because he's chatting with AI, and he's going into the parties and he's telling people what he's learning from AI was totally off the wall. And he said, I talk to it like I talk to God. That's scary because it is not God.
I promise you.
It is not God. I don't think it's the opposite of God. So, and he was a faith person. And so we had a very deep discussion theologically about how you hear from God, and it's not from AI, I can assure you. So that's a huge problem in the social atmosphere that we're in. But when you have teenagers that are being bullied, even by their parents, we had a young lady that bobbed her hair, and she had long flowing raven hair. She bobbed her hair, and the father chastised her so much on social media that she killed herself. So we need to be aware of what's going on with that. But I would just reiterate, teenagers are the most resilient group in America.
I believe that.
They are. Their suicide rate, we hear a lot about suicide because it's the number 2 cause of death for teenagers. For you and I, it's the number 10 or 11. But teenagers typically don't die from Alzheimer's. They don't die from Parkinson's disease, and very few die from cancer. They die from car accidents and suicide. That's the first cause, and the second cause is suicide. But they are the most resilient group. And then when you hit 20, it goes up. When you hit 30, it goes up. 40, it goes up. And 50, it levels out, and it kind of stays level. Platforms out there at that point. 80-year-olds might go up just a little bit, but if we can make the best group, which is the teenagers, the most resilient group, then when they hit their 20s, that suicide rate will come down. When they hit their 30s, so we've got to focus on young people and making them as strong as possible because they are our future. And the suicide rate is escalating at such a point. Since 2000, it's gone up 50%. Over 25 years, it's gone up 50%. Do the math. How long will it be before everybody is killing themselves? Right? We're just talking about a few generations and you've got everybody killing themselves. So we've got to do something to mitigate that and bring that suicide rate down. If we can strengthen the teenagers and the young people in our communities, that will make us have a stronger future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kuhn. Ms. Martin, just tapping into the social media, social comparison, and I want you to also tap into self-esteem, right? How does that collaboration of social media, social comparison impact our teens, youth, and going into, adulthood too? How is it impacting what you're seeing in your everyday practice as well?
Sure. So this topic at hand definitely brought up the organization I'm a part of in the city of Fayetteville. It's called Children in Need of Services. And so what it is a hub of different organizations within the community of Fayetteville to offer these children, these juveniles, a second chance. So a lot of these juveniles are dealing with truancy and other behavioral concerns. And a lot of times when we're on this live call with them, they lack motivation. They don't know why they want to live. They cannot identify what's important for them in their life. And at that very moment, what we tried our best to do is to offer these resources to them to follow up with. So the parent is on the call as well. And we order it in a way in their treatment plan that they have to follow up. It was recommended for them to follow up within a week's time to this provider, whether it's to get an evaluation for this provider, whether it's for parent support classes, etc. So we do see that a lot. And I do see that a lot when it comes to how these adolescents and children are influenced socially by what they have available. And instead of once again passing judgment, what are we going to do about it?
Being more actionable, sure. So when you look at the population that you're working with, are you seeing a decline in their self-concepts and how they feel about themselves?
I see a decline once they actually take initiative
Okay.
in the interest to actually engage in those self-management skills. But we first have to get that motivation there first.
So what type of monitoring system, when you stated it is, you want them to activate that next step within a week or so? Is there a monitoring system to ensure that they are actually doing it, or?
Yes, a lot of these juveniles are on probation, so they have to report to the probation officer to check in when it comes to those monitoring.
Okay. Thank you so much. Coming back to you, Dr. Kuhn, tapping into depression and PTSD with your military background. So depression and PTSD can manifest differently in the military population. What unique challenges do service members and veterans face in getting screened and treated?
Well, I'm dealing with that right now. We typically go to the VA to get services, and hopefully we get the services that we need. I had a situation in Hall County 2 years ago, and you talk about divine intervention. I was coming back from teaching at the University of North Georgia, and the chief of police for Flowery Branch called me and said, I know you're probably 2.5 hours away, which I would have been if I were here. But I said, no, I'm 10 minutes away. And I said, what's the situation? And he said, we've got a veteran in crisis. We've got the SWAT team has barricaded the subdivision, very nice subdivision. The wife had gotten out with the baby when the police tried to do a health and welfare check. It went sideways. And so they asked me to come over and try to negotiate that. The SWAT ended up trying to make entry into the house, and he started shooting at us. So they backed out. Hall County finally showed up, and about 11 o'clock that night, after about 10 hours, they popped tear gas into the house. We thought the man had taken his life because he stayed in it for 20 minutes. I've been through that in the military. I can't take it for 3 seconds. But after 20 minutes, he finally came out. But at that point, I couldn't do anything to help him because he had fired rounds at us. And so now he's in prison. I say that to say this: what got him to that point? He had an appointment with the VA mental health the day before. He sat there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and they finally came out in a packed room and they said, "You're going to have to reschedule." You can't schedule a crisis. When a crisis happens, we need to be able to act immediately. And so that's one of the problems that veterans deal with, and I am dealing with it myself right now on a disability claim, having to wait. I was talking to a friend of mine at church just this weekend. He's been waiting 5 years, and it's, and my psychologist has said, you have post-traumatic stress, but the military denies it, the VA denies it. What else do we need to do to prove that we have post-traumatic stress? And this is what that man did in Flowery Branch. He went off the chain to get attention. And unfortunately, now it's gone so bad that now he's in jail. And so post-traumatic stress is that fight, flight, or freeze syndrome. And he was fighting, right? And someone was going to get hurt. And unfortunately, that happens a lot. But I will say this too, and this may come across, I'm not sure how this will come across, but as long as I said I had post-traumatic stress disorder, I acted like I had disorder. And I decided through a good friend and counselor, she said, why don't you just drop the D for a little while and see how that works for you? Because yes, you've got post-traumatic stress. Who doesn't have post-traumatic stress though? We all have it. We've had scenarios here in this county where the police department, fire department have been called to school because of a possible risk within the school. Kids have post-traumatic stress today. So we all have some form of post-traumatic stress, but when we say that it's a disorder, we're going to act like we have a disorder. And when I finally said, yeah, I've been through some bad, challenging times, and I've got post-traumatic stress, but I began to get better when I quit saying I've got a disorder. We can speak things into existence. And so, the Bible says, as I think, so I am. And so a lot of it has to do with our thought process and our mindset. And when we think everybody's against us, we're going to fight, we're going to freeze, or we're going to flee. So that's how I would address that. We've got about 10,000 veterans in this community. There's a lot of them. And so I would say we need to show compassion, but we need to show compassion to everybody. The black, is it okay if I say the black community today? I ask that all the time. And that's typically the response I get. It's okay. I'm from the white community. We got folks from the black community. But my point being, we don't put blinders on. Anybody can be at risk. And I say that the black community, it used to be said, and you may remember this, it used to be said that in the black community, suicide was a white man's problem.
Yep.
You ever heard that?
A whole lot.
So, your mama probably heard that, and
People don't do that.
And that's not the case anymore. Now, I will say this, particularly as it relates to teenagers, because we've done a lot of talking about teenagers. White teenagers are killing themselves at a rate that's going up like this. Everyone's going up. Black teenage boys, typically 10 years ago, was 1/3 of that of white teenage boys. The trajectory for both of them is going up, but the trajectory for black teenage boys is going up at a faster incline. If it does, if everything stays the same in the next 3 to 5 years, Black teenage boys will be killing themselves faster than white teenage boys. And so we can't put blinders on suicide, depression, and all of those things that go with it to not discriminate.
I was thinking that.
Everyone is at risk. And so as a community, everyone needs to come together. And that includes the veterans, that includes the Black community and the white community and the Asian community. The Asian community has an even higher suicide rate. Japan, their suicide rate is double that of the United States. And so we have to look at culture and how can we make the culture stronger for everybody, including veterans.
Absolutely. Thank you. Ms. Rick, speaking more to depression and tapping into what Dr. Coon stated, depression in children as well as adolescents looks very different, right? Based off how they were taught to express themselves, and you spoke a little bit to this already, but it can look very different than in adults. What are some signs parents, teachers, and caregivers should watch for in their children? And let's look at ages between 8 to 14 more specifically.
Well, few of the things I mentioned earlier. Number one, if you have a child that's been an extrovert and all of a sudden they're introverted, they were outgoing and now they don't want to be bothered. Maybe they're in their room a whole lot. Also, maybe if you have a child that stopped eating, you're like, oh, you never eat dinner, because most people, they don't eat together anymore. Families don't meet. So you might notice a child that's not eating, or maybe their sleeping is off. So these are some of the signs that I would actually look for. And once again, as you stated, maybe if it's a time of their life where they're transitioning, you guys have just moved into a new neighborhood, make sure that Johnny is okay, or maybe if your child is, I'm just thinking maybe grades are going down, you're like, okay, what's going on? I noticed that, you're not achieving the way you usually achieve, as far as your grades concerned. So these are just some of the things. But being a parent, if you're in tune to your child, just try to be in tune. You'll get that good feeling. And if you're a believer, I promise you, you have a helper. They'll say, stop, slow down, something's going on, And so these are some of the warning signs that I would just share with our viewers to let them know that there are signs there, but a lot of times we get so busy, and I say we because our society now, everybody is trying to do so much for their children. I was telling someone recently, he was saying that I'm working all these jobs because I want better for my kids. I said, but most of the time, they're not going to remember all the things you bought. It's how much time you spent with them. What have you imparted into them as far as helping them with their mental health as well as their spiritual health?
Absolutely. Ms. Martin, and going into actually assisting, helping, counseling, intervention with the same age group, 8 to 14, how does that differ from intervention with adults?
Repeat it one more time for me.
Intervention as far as helping individuals with, as far as depression in children, adolescents, and looking at that age group, 8 to 14, how does that differ from adults that you work with?
I would say that the difference between adolescents and adults, you have to prompt more when it comes to adolescents, meaning you have to ask more questions and rewording your questions, stay away from the yes or no questions, but yet you're not being too intrusive or interrogating, where now they're fearful because of your facial expressions or your tone, probably not to say anything to you. So you want to make sure that you kind of set the tone, whether it's the setting where you decide to counsel them or talk to them, time of day, and also checking in with them before actually having a session. Because once again, a person can come, especially a child, can come to your session and they appear fine, but once you ask questions more, they're not fine. So then you can take it to the next step as far as what do you do now to intervene. And as a professional, you should have a crisis protocol that you are aware of and know how to utilize it in an event that, whether it's telehealth or in person, that or within the community, that you know what needs to be done to assure that, first of all, you stay calm as much as possible, the individual stays calm, but yet you're seeking help.
Can I share something
Sure.
on that line? I had and I do this a lot. Especially with our firefighters and police officers, I invite them to come to my home during COVID. I used to be a member of the gym. I've rejoined recently, but during COVID, I built out a very nice gym at the house. And so I had a parent that reached out to me and he said, the pastor had referred you. And I said, what can I do for you? And his son had been in the hospital for a week. He'd attempted suicide. His girlfriend had very publicly in the lunchroom broken up with him and embarrassed him. And so he attempted suicide. And he was going through group therapy and he was seeing a private psychologist. And so I said, well, what do you want me to do? He said, I'd like for you to meet with him. And I said, well, I'll be glad to. And the father said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm just going to work out with him. He's already got a counselor. He's already going to group therapy. He doesn't need that from me. So I'm just going to work out with him. So drop him off at my house at 7 o'clock on Saturday morning. And so we started working out and he was into working out. But I said, show me how you do your bench press. And he was floundering all over the place and he didn't have a good his butt on the seat like he should have. And I said, get your butt down there and keep it grounded, get your feet planted, pull them back a little bit and drive it like you're trying to drive yourself into the ground. Instead of pushing it up, you're pushing yourself down. That's easier if you think about it mentally. And so we had a great workout, but every time I would talk to him about something, I would say, working out is a lot like life. You've got something that's coming against you. So you have to push against it and you have to have a strong foundation. For me, that's faith in God. And so we talked about that. And so with every exercise, I'm trying to interject a truth that'll help him mentally or a truth that will help him spiritually. And I dropped him off about 8:30 that morning at a subdivision down in Noonan. Before I got out of the subdivision, he was texting me, Mr. Lou, when can we work out again? And 2 days later, the dad called me and said, I don't know what you did, but we were able to sleep through the night last night without fear that our son was going to kill himself because he was sound asleep. And he's 20 years old today and he's doing great and he's enjoying working out. The neat thing was he increased his bench press 30 pounds that day. So that made him feel good. With soldiers, I used to do the same thing. Instead of meeting in our office, I'd say, let's go for a walk. And that way I've got the power of endorphins working into my benefit as well. And the sunshine, because sunshine gives us vitamin D and it makes us feel better. And so it wasn't me making them feel better. It was being outside walking. But when I'm associated with them in that, even when we're not walking together, they feel good through association because I make them feel good when we were out there walking. And so those are some ways that we can increase the resilience of people. And instead of just a plain clinical setting all the time, engaging them in activities.
Absolutely.
Can
Absolutely.
I say this too? Because you're right, because you probably heard the saying, people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. I find a lot of times with my clients, especially the groups, they're like, I love being in your groups. It's not that I'm just so dynamic. It's the fact that I show them that I care.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just I'm good. I'm glad to see you today. You look nice. Sometimes it's not just the therapy part of it, like going through the CBD, the DBT and all the techniques,
Right.
But sometimes I'll sit there and just listen and just let them know I care about you. I want to hear what you have to say. And I'll say, this is crazy. I'm like, oh, it's okay. I even had someone who's going through some things that's my age group probably wouldn't agree with, but I don't look at it like, you're thinking about what? I'm asking Holy Spirit, I'm like, help me to show, the compassion. And then when I'm able to get that trust, then I can maybe show you a different perspective on this versus me just judging you up front, like, you're thinking about what? And I had to learn to just sit with it for a second. And I'm finding they'll come and tell me I hear everything. And I'm glad that, I'm able to be used like that because I'd rather for them to hear from me and feel like I care, where I can give them a perspective of it that's different than what the friends that they're around would probably give them that advice or that wisdom that they feel like they have. So it's very important. I agree with you that we I take walks with them a lot. I'm a walking queen. I'm like, let's take they're, anxious or worked up, especially if they come in and they're very just worked up about something. Let's take a walk. And by the time we get through with that walk, we might just talk or, we might listen to a little music. I love music therapy. I tell them, what's your favorite song? Let's listen to a little bit of that. And usually by that time, when it's time to go back to our groups, whatever we're doing, they're ready to express whatever they need to talk about. And it usually don't take long.
Yeah. So I'm hearing building rapport is very important. Of course, active listening, all key components, right, to building that dynamics, that working dynamics. Do you find it, Ms. Martin, difficult when you're working or any challenges when you're working with younger individuals in building that same rapport that the panelists just spoke about?
It could be challenging, but once again, it's our approach. If we approach it in a challenging way, it's going to present challenging to us. So instead of trying to force a person to talk or asking questions, sometimes it's okay to have a blank piece of paper and coloring pencils available or pencils available. If you don't feel like talking, if you want to draw how you feel, you can.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have certain images to help them, encourage them to express themselves. So expression does not have to come from vocalization. It can come from different ways of communicating.
Thank you so much. So moving on to our next theme, we're going to tap into, and I'm going to start off with you, Ms. Martin, ADHD awareness, since it is ADHD Awareness Month as well. And Dr. Kuhn talking about, again, more so tapping into PTSD. You've highlighted that we have 10,000 veterans right here in the city of Fayetteville, and how we can kind of start standing in that gap for them. All right, so now looking at ADHD, Ms. Martin, ADHD is most often diagnosed in childhood, but sometimes overlooked. How can screening in schools help identify children earlier, and why does early intervention matter when we're looking at ADHD?
It definitely can help. I would say before even school, the preschool age. A lot of times I educate my families and school providers about the diagnostic centers where at the very onset you can get your child more so assessed to see their functionality, the functionality of their skill sets. So if they're not functioning to their appropriate age range, then we can intervene there to help them with their speech, to help them with the occupational. Of course, there may be outside resources that you may have to have available to do that, but that's an option. Also, behavior support. So whether it is the tantrums that tends to interfere with their communication or their limited verbal or vocal skills, a child can still communicate. So finding how they communicate is more sort of the first steps. But like I mentioned, the early intervention, even before school. So by the time they do get into kindergarten, they already have an IEP. That's an individualized educational plan where you can also have a provider such as behavior analysts to help overlook your IEP to make sure those social emotional goals are actually being implemented within the school to help your child to really have those breaks and those accommodations that they need so they can thrive in the school setting.
Awesome. Also, ADHD is sometimes misunderstood as behavior problems. So how do behavior analysts such as yourself help reframe ADHD behaviors and support clients with evidence-based strategies?
Once again, it goes back to behavior. Behaviors are motivated by something, whether it's sensory, automatic, neurodevelopmental issues, whether it's attention-seeking, avoidant behavior, or something tangibly that someone wants. By either case, to know the function of why a person is doing what they're doing, it helps then to put in replacement behaviors instead of engaging in the inappropriate behavior, whether it's the profanity, whether it's the throwing or property destruction. What exactly do you want or need? So learning how to effectively communicate could be a functional behavior. Learning that it's okay to take a break. It's okay to ask for help. So maybe they've never been in an environment or around others that actually asked those questions and actually implemented it. So I would say it starts from there.
Okay. So in essence, kind of reframing ADHD in a way of looking at it as skill gaps versus behavior defiance.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. For you, Dr. Kuhn, we're looking into PTSD and what resources you can share, and what resources assist for families of service members who may also experience depression and PTSD.
So obviously you have the VA, and you've heard how I feel about some of that, but working with trauma specialist
Yeah.
is good. In one of the churches down in Noonan, once a year, I also do a PTSD support group. After the first week, we drop the D and we tell them we're going to not refer to it that way anymore. But it's a 12-week program and it is a faith-based program. And the neat thing is, the last group, for example, they didn't want to stop after 12 weeks. And I said, good. Who's going to be your leader? I can't be your leader. I've got other commitments, but I continue to stay in touch with them and actually ate lunch with one of the members the other day. And it's been over a year. And so we've built community. And so, again, it's like the veteran that's not getting help. He didn't go to the desert by himself. Why are you trying to fight this war here by yourself? And so if we can create safe community and put it around actions and events and things, especially guys, um, ladies a lot of times can get together and talk, but guys need a reason to be talking. And so we just know that that's the way we're different. So there's a lot of organizations, veteran organizations out there that do fun weekends, whether it's rock climbing or, obstacle courses or fishing, things of that nature, working out together. I mean, bowling, you could do that. But just staying actively engaged with your brothers and sisters who were in the military, because you get out and you lose touch with your community, and your community, that's what made you strong, was your community. And so we've got to stay engaged with our community. Churches could offer, especially during veterans holidays and things like that, a meal for veterans to honor the sacrifices that they've made. That's a great way to engage the church in reaching the veteran community. Because I've had veterans from this community that still drive to Fort Benning on Sundays because that's where they felt like they were part of. They wouldn't go to the local churches. They drove 90 miles to Fort Benning to go to church. Well, that's fine. At least you're going to church. But what could we do to offer to create a veteran-friendly churches in our own community? And so that's a big one, I think.
And I want to interject with that. I agree with you because my husband and I, we pastor a church here in Fayetteville, Shekinah Glory Fellowship Center. And we're offering more faith-based community counseling for veterans and people who, might not have the privilege of going to therapy or knowing that there are people in their community who really care about them. And so we're both professional Christian counselors. And so we have made it a point to give back into our community. And like you said, with the veterans, we're implementing more things in Fayetteville as well. And then I also have an 8-week mindset reset boot camp for women. You're right, women, we do sometimes have more resources, but because I am a woman, I think I have more that I can give to the women as far as personal experiences and with my professional experiences. And for 8 weeks, we go in there and change our mindset. You know, how we're talking about taking what you said, that what is the D off of there? Right. But it's important that we understand too the importance of our words, so death and life is in the power of our tongue. And a lot of times when I'm using CBT skills, it's in the word of God, be ye transformed by renewing of your mouth. Death and life is in the power of my tongue. And if I keep saying I'm stressed out, guess what's going to happen? I'm going to get more of that. Now, we're not denying the fact that you don't have those symptoms now. Right. We're not going to do that, but we're going to teach you how to reframe your thinking. And we're going to use the power of God. And that's when we can see rapid radical results, permanent changes. I tell them we don't just treat it, we want to cure it so that you won't have to worry about going back to it. And that's only through the power of God and his word.
Are either of you familiar with with the military one source?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great resource.
Okay, can you speak more
Uh,
to?
Well, you can utilize one source for a vast array of things. And
Okay.
then we have the yellow, I don't know if I've been out for about 4 years now, so I don't know if we're still doing yellow ribbon events, but that's important for veterans as a way of transitioning back into civilian life. Because the reality is, we do have the active duty, but a lot of folks that went to the desert were National Guard or Army Reserve. And when they come back home, they got to go to work to Home Depot or Walmart or the gas station or whatever, or corporate America. And so those coming home events help us to transition back into it, because when you're in the desert, you've only got one responsibility, and that is to stay alive. Yeah, you've got a mission, but other than that, stay alive. And so we know just from the data that the high rate for suicide is 30 days before you come home, and it's 30 days after you get home. So there's a 60-day window there where we've got to have strong reintegration points so that they can move through those 60 days without incident that increases the risk. Because in the desert, I get 3 hots and a cot, just don't get killed, do your job, and you'll be okay. But if you're coming home, in 30 days, I'm coming home and I got to go back to corporate America. And that first sergeant, he don't jihad with corporate America, but he's got to go back anyway. And he liked being in that environment. Many of y'all probably watched the movie Hurt Locker. You know, he's living off of the adrenaline of being in the desert and what it does for you. And now I'm coming home and I got to cut the grass again, and I got to start paying the bills, and I got to wipe the baby's rear end, and I've got to listen to the spouse who I might not be in good communication with anyway. So now, is it stressful to be in the desert getting shot at? Yeah. But now I'm coming home to a whole new different stress.
Absolutely.
When my oldest son's been deployed 3 times. When he came home, his little brother, who was 13 at the time, snuck up on him to jump on his back, and McCrae just about killed him. And the next morning, I threw the keys at him. I said, "Let's go to the gym." We got on the highway, and he's on Interstate 85 going down to Noonan, and he was driving 30 miles an hour. I said, "Son, you got to speed up. We're going to get ran over." But that's part of the post-traumatic stress. He's looking for an IED that's not there,
Right.
because that's what he did for 6 months in the desert. So that's part of the reintegration, talking about these things. We're back in the home state can be dangerous too, but it's not like the desert. So that's how we can reintegrate back into the society that we came from.
Thank you so much. We've also, just to make it known, we've added the Military One Source on the Mental Health Hub, so that you all can
Good.
have that access to. I saw Ms. Martin writing it down. So it's on that hub for our citizens, but also for our local therapists as well. So we're moving into our last theme, and it's kind of tying everything together: systems, stigma, and access. And I'm going to, instead of going to Mr. Kuhn, I always kind of start off with him. I'm going to go to you, Ms. Martin, kind of tap into ADHD. Again, what role does ongoing monitoring after initial screening play in helping individuals manage depression as well as ADHD symptoms effectively?
So I would say when it comes to monitoring, it is about data, information that we retrieve. So knowing, once again, what a person presents with, I go back to behavior, the frequency, how often, the severity of it is the baseline, the onset, the presenting situation that a person is currently dealing with. Then based off the intervention piece, how we're going to intervene to help reduce this behavior, we should then see a decline. Now, if the intervention is not as effective, is not working, then we have to come back to the drawing board to see what other intervention is or could possibly work, because what works for one person may not work for another person. ADHD, I'm sorry, ADHD, so many acronyms, presents differently based off the person. So we want to individualize that.
Okay, thank you. And as a local policymaker, when it comes to this particular area, I think policymakers should kind of move away from, after we've done extremely well for the Mental Health Advisory Board, our year one has been amazing with awareness campaigns, getting out there in the community, letting citizens know that we are here and that they can reach out to us if they need us. But moving more away from just the awareness proclamations, but into more of the funding, services, and things of that nature. So that's our hope for our year two and how we can start moving towards, like you stated, integrating more into the community, working firsthand, not just the awareness, but standing in those gaps. Moving to you, Dr. Kuhn, looking at being that suicide prevention specialist for us, how can community-based screening initiatives help identify at-risk individuals before they reach a crisis point?
I don't delve into that a lot with what I do.
Mhm.
Personally, I'm kind of a frontline guy. I get called when there's a suicide risk. So I would kind of be talking off the top of my head if I
Okay.
were to address that. But obviously it's important in the schools, at the beginning of the year. How are you doing? Doing the assessments, checking in with people. That's obviously very important. I will say this though, particularly in regards to the military, we had what was called PHA Day, that's Physical Health Assessment Day. And so if we haven't taken the time to build rapport with people, then it's very easy to say, no, I'm not having any problems. I had a first sergeant, I will never forget, I was out in Texas, I was visiting the unit, and it was PHA Day, the sun was shining in his face, and it was 7 o'clock in the morning, he lowered his glasses, and he told the troops, he said, today's PHA Day, and you all know how to answer the question. And he winks at everybody. I knew exactly what he was talking about. He was telling them to go in there and say, no, I don't have any problems. Because that would make the unit not green. That would make the soldier not green. You have to be green to be deployable. Is the unit green? It's the soldier green. And there's different reasons for not being green. Maybe you need to get your will set up. Maybe you haven't been to your physical to get your shots. Today, we want to be completely green. You're going to get your shots and you're going to answer the question. No, I'm not having any issues. And so I didn't call this first sergeant out in front of everybody, but before they got in line, I said, First Sergeant, you need to stand in front of that line as they're going in and you need to correct them for the mistake that you made. And you need to look the soldiers in the eye and say, if you're having problems, tell the truth. Tell the truth. And I was standing there as a chaplain, and I'm here for you if you need me. So yes, assessments are important, but if we haven't taken time to build rapport with people, they'll answer it however they want to answer it.
It's fair.
And that's just my own personal experience from years of working with it.
Absolutely. And speaking, just kind of piggybacking off of him, Martin, as far as the assessment, the community-based screening initiatives, and how does it help to identify the at-risk individuals? But he make a great point. We engage our clients, and in some cases, they actually can mislead us on some of those assessments.
Oh, yeah.
How do you ensure that your intervention methods are capturing some of those fallacies?
I would say depending on what exactly information trying to collect, to be able to identify the suggestibility of a person, meaning if there's misleading information that they could be presenting you with, there's a scale or a clinical tool that can be used to see the severity or the index of how this person may report. So based off of that, you know that it may be a situation where you may have to re-interview them again, another date, another time, to see if both dates align.
Absolutely. So instead of doing that PHQ-9 and that GAD-7 on a monthly basis, bring it in a little bit closer to every 2 weeks, and you can kind of catch some of those inconsistencies in
Yeah.
their behaviors, their answers, and things of that nature. So we're going to move on to closing. We've had y'all in the hot seat for a good little minute here. So we're going to move on to closing, and I'm going to ask you all just 1 minute each to provide an answer to this question here. If you could leave the audience with one call to action during National Depression and Mental Health Screening Month, as well as ADHD awareness, what would it be? And I'll start with you, Ms. Ricks.
Don't be afraid to reach out for help. Once again, seeking help is not a sign of weakness, but it's actually a sign of strength. And the best gift that you can give yourself is to get the help that you need. That's a form of self-care and self-love.
Dr. Kuhn?
I made a plea this morning. I was training at there. Thank you. I made a plea this morning. I was training at the police department, but I said, whenever we're doing a training here in our community, please come to the training. It's called Listen, Learn, Lead. It's part of the Intervene Challenge. And yes, it is suicide intervention focused, but at the same time, you take those skills and you can apply them to a lot of things in life. And so get the training that we offer on a regular basis. I don't mind traveling all over the country. I was in Hawaii 2 weeks ago training. I'll go there again if I can. But I'm concerned about my local community. And if we could make our local community stronger, we're going to have people come into our hotels to stay in our conference facilities because they're going to want to know, what have you done to change the paradigm here in Fayette County? And so that's my recommendation. Let's make our community the strongest community possible. And you can only do that by getting the training. I say, and fire departments know this, there's a motto on the wall in the fire department that I work with a lot. And it says, we always default to the level of our training. So if we can raise the level of our training, we're going to be stronger.
Absolutely. That's great. Ms. Martin?
What I would add to that is to hone into yourself, start focusing on your own self-care, wherever that may be for you. Sometimes you just have to sit still to kind of figure that out, because what motivated you yesterday may not motivate you today. So it's okay to try new things. It's okay to not to be okay. It's okay to reach out and just speak to someone. At times, it's important to speak to someone outside the family or outside your circle, and just take it day by day, hour by hour. And surely there should be a change in how you feel, how you think, and how you behave. So
And I would like to add this in. That's why I'm so glad that you have the vision that you have for our Mental
Thank
Health
you.
Advisory Board. Because here in the great city of Fayetteville, we're not just talking about it. As they say on the streets, we're being about it, you know?
good.
And I'm just excited about the city that's involved with us. I see our mayor, I see our councilmen and our councilwoman, that they're being active about this, and they're for real, they're serious. So
Absolutely.
when I found out we had the Mental Health Advisory Board, I was excited, and I was just honored to be chosen to be a part of this board. And so whenever you call for me, you know I'm coming.
Yeah.
And our board, we're really serious about our mental health, and we have a plethora of resources that we've made available to our citizens. And I thank you for that.
It's
And
my
I want to
pleasure.
let them know, our viewers, that we are here for you.
Absolutely. I would like to turn the attention now to our audience. For those of you that may have some questions before closing, do anyone have any questions for our panelists? Sure.
How can families recover and heal together after a suicide attempt or major depressive episode?
Specialist.
okay.
So in Peachtree City, a few years ago, when the new chief came in, I had been wanting to implement a program called Lost Teams. It's a national grassroots movement. My mentor that trained me in suicide intervention started doing this in Louisiana back in the 70s, but it's proactively engaging individuals who are survivors of suicide. And the survivor of suicide is just like if Grandpa Moses dies, he's survived by Grandma Moses, you know. So the survivors are the ones left behind. So if we can engage the survivors who are left behind more quickly, the evidence from his PhD studies 30 years ago shows that we take, normally, if there's any counseling that happens at all, it takes 6 years for that person to get into counseling after a suicide. But through the Lost Teams, it comes down to 6 months and they're in counseling. And so engaging with the community, with the person who has had loss, encouraging them to get the counseling, that's big. The other thing I would say, if you know folks that have had loss, I ask people all the time who've had loss, I didn't know your son, Johnny. I would like to get to know your son, Johnny. Will you tell me your favorite memory? Because parents, especially, they want to be able to talk about their kids, but people don't know that they can talk about the child. And so I've never had anybody that's never told me a favorite story. I did have one lady, and I'll share this very quickly. I asked her, what's your favorite memory? She said, I don't have any. He was extreme bipolar. She'd ended up in the hospital on several occasions because he had beat her. And I said, I'm so sorry. And then I just sat there for a moment in silence just with her. It's a ministry of presence. And but she was thinking. And she said, you know what? There is one memory. And I said, tell me what that is. And it was back before we knew that he had a condition. He was 3 years old. And I had told him, do not get on the kitchen counter. If you want a cookie, ask me for a cookie. And so me and my husband were in the living room watching TV and we heard him moving around and my husband snuck in on him. And that little 3-year-old was sitting on top of the counter with the big cookie jar in his hand. He'd taken the top off. He had 2 big cookies in his hand and he realized he was caught. And he looked at his daddy and he said, cookie for you, daddy, cookie for you. And she started laughing and I started laughing and she started crying and I started crying. And she said, thank you. Thank you for helping me to remember that. And I said, if you can't remember anything else, you remember that day that your little 3-year-old was trying to bribe his daddy with a cookie. And she said, thank you. And to this day, if I see her again, she says, when was the last time you had a cookie? Right. So things like that. But the Lost Team is a project that we've got locally. And that's one of the reasons that I show up on the scene when there's a loss for both Vet County, Fire Department, Peachtree City, and a couple of agencies in Coweta County, is to help begin that process of reaching the people who are left behind.
And to add to that, I would say therapeutic wise, you want to consult with, I would say, at least 3 providers to get a feel of the provider that's actually going to provide you services. So that way you feel comfortable navigating. I come across a lot of situations as such, and just to have a space for an individual to cry if they want to cry or not cry at all, to sit idle is okay. And so you want to have maybe present certain questions to a provider just to ensure your comfort before you proceed.
And I would just suggest family group counseling, like grief counseling as a family unit. And I found that to be very successful for families who are grieving. Because a lot of times I've heard my clients saying they carry more guilt about, the suicide as far as them feeling like it might be their fault or we couldn't prevent this. So I think it's vital for the family unit to stay connected through counseling, knowing how to be there for each other in a healthy manner.
We do have SOS here in the county, which is Survivors of Suicide, and they meet once a month at Piedmont, and so that's an option as well. And it's not clinical; it's peer to peer with survivors, and so you're working together. So that's called SOS.
Do you have any other questions for our panelists? Okay, if not, I want to first thank our panelists for just your insight, your expertise on all the topics that we covered tonight, as well as our audience for for being here and taking part in this important conversation. We want to let you all know that we are here as a city. We're doing everything possible to ensure that you know the resources that are available, that you can reach out to us. So please make sure that you use all the resources that are available. Please go to the Mental Health Advisory Board hub or come to our meetings and let us know what you need from us as well. So again, thank you all for being here. And I'll see you two at our meeting on next Tuesday. But again, thank you all for joining.
Thank you
Have a
for
great
having
night,
us.
everyone.
Have a great night, you all.